Hi everyone, welcome to another special session. This one is with Richard Rudd, a man that touched so many souls with his wisdom. I'm just going to hand this over to Theo and Sarah, and I'm going back at the end of this with some questions from the attendees. Bye guys.
Thanks so much.
Andrea. Hello, everyone. It's so good to be here together. I am Theo. I am based in Romania, Bucharest, and I am the head of brand here at Growmotely. I would just love for us, before we dive into the conversation, I would just love to invite us all to just get comfortable in our space, wherever we are, and just get comfortable in our bodies. And just drop into this present moment, and in this energy and in our togetherness today. And I'm going to ask you, if you want, to close your eyes, and we're going to take 3 deep breaths together. And at the same time, I would love to ask you to place your heart over your chest, just above your heart. And as we breathe together, to just feel the warmth of your heart. Just feel its vibration and how it's pulsating, and just feel into the miracle in our bodies, in our genes, and just feel into the miracle of us being here today in this moment to share this conversation. So let's take the first breath together, a deep one in and out. Another deep breath in and out. And a final deep breath in and out. And blinking our eyes open. Thank you so much for doing this with me, and thank you so much for being here. I'm so grateful for all your presence here, and I'm grateful to share this conversation with Richard. My first encounter with Gene Keys happened, I think, about 3 or 4 years ago. And my connection to the Gene Keys has deepened over the last maybe 2 years or so. It has had such a profound impact in my life. And ever since, one of my dreams has been to be able to bring some of the knowledge and wisdom in the Gene Keys into the business world, because I feel it's very needed. I'm also really grateful to share this conversation with Sarah. She is and has been my unofficial mentor, and she's been such a great part of my transformational journey. And I'm so happy to be sharing this conversation with you, Richard, with you, Sarah, and with all of you watching us all around the world. So just to break into the conversation, Richard, welcome. And I know there are many people here in the audience who are familiar with your work, but for those who aren't familiar with your work, could you share a bit about, obviously, your work and what the Gene Key transmissions are bringing to us in the world? And as well, if you can touch a bit on this huge change that we're experiencing collectively, this huge evolutionary leap. Yeah, if we could just dive into that topic.
Just very simple then. Thank you. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you, Theo, and hi, Sarah. It's nice to meet you. You know, the Gene Keys really, in essence, because there's so many, it's a big field to explore, but in essence, it's about wisdom and I kind of like to show the difference between knowledge and wisdom, and wisdom being something that is of the sphere of the mind, and can be understood and learned in a linear way. And we know about knowledge. Wisdom we know less about. It's a more feminine quality. It's a quality that is found in nature, in our bodies. It has perhaps more in common with our right brain, a different, a more intuitive, felt sense of things, of knowing things, and it's inside us. And so the whole purpose of my teachings and the gene keys and all the other things that I do, and the central technique, which I call the art of contemplation, is about unlocking the wisdom that's already inside us. That's why it's called the gene keys, because it's inside our DNA. It's literally, we are just vessels of wisdom, and wisdom also can be equated to love, so wisdom is connected to having an open heart. And so it also involves healing the heart and potential traumas that we may carry. So it's a whole journey, working to dig out wisdom from inside us. And I agree, it's much needed in the world and in the business world. And wise people are fairly rare, and we tend to see wise people as old people, and that's not necessarily the case. Many young people are very wise, and middle-aged people can be very wise. Wisdom is not to do with age. It's to do with something much more mysterious, this inner connection that we build intuitively with our body, with our being, with nature, with our environment, with our heart, and with each other. And so the gene keys, even though I'm not going at all into like describing how they work or any of those things. I want to tell you that's what they do for us, and so there are a set of teachings that provoke, trigger, catalyze, initiate wisdom, and sometimes they do that in a tricky way, so they do it without you realizing they're doing it. And so I say that up front, so you come in, you might be expecting to learn something about knowledge in a linear way, and actually what happens is you get tricked into wisdom, and into revelation, and that's a different way of learning, and it's a shortcut of in a way, because it gets you to the truth of things much quicker than analysis. Analysis has its place and it has its role, and it's fantastic and it's wonderful, and the scientific method and all of that is wonderful, and all those structures that we created and we continue to create in the world that make our life better, and sometimes not always better, but generally that provide for us and give us our comforts and our securities. Wisdom cuts through all of that stuff. It cuts underneath, much deeper. It's more of an indigenous felt sense in every human being. And when you have it, you feel truly secure in the world, no matter what's happening around you, and connected to your eternal nature as well, to perhaps a more spiritual part of life. And your other question is about the change, and the change is connected to the wisdom, because the change is the opening up of our wisdom, and we can see this beginning to happen in the world. Wisdom is, as I said, it's a feminine held presence. It doesn't mean it's about women specifically, but it is about women actually. But it's also everywhere. It's as much in men as it is in women. It's in every creature. It's in every stone. It's everything. It's everywhere. But it's a feminine essence, and so women particularly have a kind of. It's easier generally for women to find wisdom inside themselves, because it's just there, accessible. Men have to get through, I speak as a man, have to get through a lot of that logic, a lot of that stuff that we've been conditioned with. And if we can get through, it's the same for all of us, actually. We all have to get through that stuff. But, once we get behind all that, that's when we start to find these what we call these pearls of wisdom, and the pearls are invaluable because they're these wormholes, these shortcuts that create greater efficiency, that actually they're common sense. That's the beautiful thing about wisdom. It's we have this lovely word, common sense, this expression in English, common sense. And wisdom is basically common sense. And so what we're seeing in the world, as a lot of those linear structures that we've created that have a masculine flavor to them, because they're about authority and hierarchy and control, a lot of those things are quivering and crumbling. And because we've built we're acting in an unsustainable way. Our growth is growing and growing, and we're growing and growing and growing, and like the virus that's taking over us, we are that virus that's growing and growing and growing, and then damaging the system. And we all know this. It's a story. It's a common story, especially in these summits and in these workshops that everyone attends. And we know this. And yet, many people are still behaving as normal, and possibly that may continue for some time. But the change that's here now is coming, and it will the Gene Keys hold a kind of prophecy as well, that this you can't kind of escape the wisdom because it's built into the system. And so the whole system itself, nature, humans, all of it, it's all one interconnected system. And so the system engineers its own breakthroughs, and we're just a pawn in that. We think we're so powerful doing all these things, responsible for all these things, and we're just a part of the mechanism that is engineering its own breakthrough. And breakthrough comes at a cost, always, because for a big breakthrough to happen in nature, there's something has to go, something has to be sacrificed. So an old way, an old paradigm, an old form has to decay, and that's what's happening all over the planet. And it's an alarming time. It can be a frightening time. It can be a time of worry, and for many people, I guess my teaching comes here to say we needn't be worried. We must act on the side of justice and all of those things. And yet we needn't be worried because the system has got our back. It's built into nature to engineer its own breakthroughs. And it's always been that way. And we look back into evolutionary history and we see these things, that is a knowing that comes from being inside a body with an open heart. That's how we come to this wisdom. So anyway, that's the beginning, I guess.
Right at the start of the summit, before we started, I pulled a card from one of my favorite archetype decks, and the card was Share Wisdom, and that's been on my altar for the entire 3 days. So that's really beautiful to kind of hear that come full circle. I also, if you don't mind, Theo, me jumping in here with a couple of thoughts. I mentioned yesterday about the last time I sat with ayahuasca and how she showed me that this feminine energy is now on the planet and it's here, the balance. And she showed me, you don't need to fight for this. The fight is on the other side now. The fight is the energy that's not wanting to let go, which feels very resonant with what you're saying, that it's just here and it's happened, and nature is naturally kind of taking care of this for us. And I think it's really such an interesting time. I mean, the name of this session is Business as a Force for Good, to be seeing this come into business and what's possible for us to transform and evolve business. And I've felt my own fear and resistance along the way, having been a founder since 2009 and being very serious in the business world, for some time, and now actually building what I believe to be the most important work of my life, and probably the biggest work of my life from a business sense. But having this knowing and this trust and this faith to build it in a completely new way that I know in my heart, that I feel in my heart, and that Theo and the rest of the team are here, and all of our people joining this session want to be part of this type of business. I would love to hear you talk to a little bit about that and the breaking down of the old ways of doing things and how we step into these new ways.
Yeah, I mean, I'm at right now in doing a virtual retreat with several thousands of people. It's a long retreat over 4 months, and it's about prosperity and how to ignite prosperity in our lives. And it's very radical, and because it's showing us the difference between wealth and accumulation and prosperity. So wealth accumulation, where we're gathering and growing and growing and growing, and prosperity as flow. So prosperity is constantly spending what it has, and then more comes, and it's giving, and it's constantly giving in this torus, energy field. And the key to it is a question that we ask ourselves, and that we've been asking ourselves all the way through this retreat. And it's a question that business needs to ask itself, and each of us as individuals need to ask itself. And it's a core question, and it's, how can I be of the greatest service to the whole? Mm-hmm. And it's an incredibly profound and simple question. And if your business keeps on asking that question, and if you keep on asking that question, then that question is the guide. It's the North Star that keeps you, it will bring you through even difficult times, because then you'll everything that comes out of that question, every action, every thought, will be in that sense selfless. Even it doesn't mean it's all about everything else, but it's a service-based question, and it's what many businesses aren't built on that question. And if your business isn't built on that question, it will one day decline. Mm-hmm. It is inevitable, because it cannot sustain itself if it's not connected to everything else, if it's not being of service. And it won't create loyalty, and it won't create all those noble qualities that are in a really good serving business. That is you really know that this this group of people are here for you, and for each other as well, but for you. So that's a real core one, I think. I also when we mentioned women, like I'm from a background where my family are wine and spirit merchants in London, and that business was founded by a woman and a widow, actually, back in the 1600s, late 1600s. Very old business, been in the same families, two families, ever since. It's one of the oldest businesses in the country. And people often say, how you survived, and we survived because we adapted. But I believe that the real reason we've survived, and not just survived, but thrived, is because we put our values above all else. We always ask that question, like, how can we be of the greatest service? Not always to the whole. That's now become even more of a, that's a much bigger question now, that how can we be of the service to the whole? That includes, doing inventory of how sustainable is our business, and what are the energy costs truly, and so all those things, that's a whole new world for an old business to look at that's been established. But interestingly, the business as it stands today is run by 5 women, and this is a wine world. So, and since it's been run by these women, and some of the men left, who had, who were there, it's been incredibly successful. And there's, I've watched and witnessed, and there's a quality of empathy that's there that wasn't there before, and that empathy that gives attention to the relationships everywhere creates a climate, a culture of cohesion and harmony. And it's not always perfect, but listening. And that's a community, that's a family, that's a healthy family dynamic. And so if businesses can kind of understand this feminine view, and it's cropping up everywhere. I mean, you're modeling it, here, Sarah and Theo, everything you're doing. It's coming more and more into the business domain. So you're asking the right questions from the beginning, I think. Like business as a force for good. I mean, I often joke to people. I say, look, if we just put women in charge of everything, the world will change overnight. But it's not going to happen like that, because men have to kind of come with us.
You're valuable too.
But I empathize, from where I sit.
That's funny. We're raising funds right now. The common question that VCs ask is kind of like, what's your competitive advantage, or how are you going to protect yourselves from somebody else coming in and doing the same thing? And I'm just like, well, I don't know if you will understand this, but like, we have heart, and Growmotely is a conscious entity, and it exists, and I don't have to worry about any of that because it's not even me. But I give them sometimes some other answers that are a little easier for them to understand. But
I mean, I'd love to share something with you about my business, Gene Keys, that we recently had one of those vision sessions of like, okay, where do we want to be? Where do we want to go? And we asked ourselves, how do we want this to end? It's such a great question for a business. How do we want this to end? And it's such a deep question, because then you kind of work back from there. Well, I'd like this to become this, and then you work back. And we realized that we didn't want the business to go on growing and growing and growing forever. We wanted we wanted it to sustain our lives and meet our requirements, for each of us. But then let us go home. So we actually are now designing a business that will kind of come to not to an end, but will no longer need us, and will no longer need to keep growing in terms of it. The business itself doesn't need to grow, but the wisdom needs to grow. And that's different. So if you can get the business to a size where that's enough, then the wisdom and the service can grow exponentially. But the business doesn't need to grow. In fact, the business can get to a point where it's so simple that and it's so sustainable that it just goes on growing in other ways that you can't see, and that you can't predict and you can't control, because it's not your business anymore. It's a movement, it's a creative movement that's been generated, an awakening in a way. So it's a really interesting question for a business to ask, like, how do we want this to end?
Yeah, I can relate to that a lot. I started an organization called the League of Extraordinary Women in 2011 or 2010, I think it was, with 3 other female co-founders, because we really wanted to raise the level of female participation in the entrepreneurial ecosystem globally. And back at that, and it blew up. Like this was my first understanding of a business being a conscious entity outside of myself, that this thing came through us and it existed, and we were just like, whoa, what just happened? Like, okay, let's do this thing. Obviously it needed to exist at the time. And I remember talking to people along the journey, and we would always say, when they said, what's the end goal? And we would say, well, for this to not need to exist, for it to be redundant, that we don't need an organization to raise female participation in entrepreneurship. And in a lot of ways, it's kind of happened. Like the League of Extraordinary Women is still around, and it's having a rest right now. It's having a hiatus, and I don't know if it's going to crop back up or not. But the work that it was certainly there to do in its first iteration has been done in the world. And it was so beautiful to see and to go on that journey with it, and not be like attached to it having to be like something for some reason that didn't really make sense for what it actually was and is.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
It's really cool.
And they're everywhere, the League of Extraordinary Women now.
They are.
So it obviously worked.
It did work. It's amazing.
It's continuing to work.
I'm so grateful to have chosen me. Theo, I know you had some specific questions prepared,
yes.
and I'm just going to keep hijacking if you don't.
I'm honestly a Gene Keys geek, sort of. And the first time we designed this session, Business as a Force of Good, my mind or my heart, I'm not sure which one, went straight to Gene Key 45, which is also a Gene Key I have in my map. And Gene Key 45 is the archetypal energy that moves from the shadow frequency of dominance to the gift frequency of synergy. And I was just thinking about how this is playing out, especially in the business world, in the world in general, in different ways and different forms. But I feel like in the business world, this dominance, this dominant energy and this dominance energy is very, very, very visible. And I would just love for us to explore this Gene Key a bit, Richard, and especially where the future is taking us, where this evolutionary impulse is taking us, because I feel like synergy as a concept is truly exciting if we get to embody it on this earth. So I would just love to explore that a bit with you.
Yeah, it's a great start. In a way, I might bring some more words in to illuminate this point a bit. Like the dominance energy, you could say that that's the foundation of hierarchy. And hierarchy is built into nature, actually, and so it's a natural part of life. And yet it's one component of life, and so you have hierarchy, which is that dominating energy, but then you also have what you said, synergy. So hierarchy you could see as vertical, and then synergy is more horizontal. So you might say that hierarchy is that way, and this one is like another word is heterarchy. It's a heterarchy is where there's evenness there's creativity because there's no leaders in that. Everyone is the leader, right? So and so synergy is that energy where creativity is given freedom to explore itself, and when it does that, incredible exciting things can occur. And so a heterarchy, heterarchies can exist quite well within hierarchies as well. So for instance, in a business, a heterarchy works very well in it works very well as a kind of creative part of the business, where those creative people are left to be creative, and no one's trying to control them, and so they come up with all kinds of amazing things. And so that's synergy at work. And that energy can also be used throughout any business, throughout any community. It should be, in a way. It needs to be given freedom. And yet on its own, that's not an answer either, because heterarchy on its own it doesn't have enough vertical energy to organize itself efficiently. Its efficiency is in its sparks, so it finds incredible breakthroughs and engineers them, but then to order them into in a practical way as well, you need the hierarchy, so you need those two in balance, and there's a transcendence when they're working together in harmony, which is represented by those higher words, like the word communion, which is connected with that 45th gene key. Or another lovely word, the one number 44, is synarchy. So you have hierarchy, heterarchy. Hierarchy is the vertical, heterarchy is the horizontal. Synarchy is circular. It's both. It's beyond both. And so it's another word. I like words that people don't know what they mean, because then that word has so many meanings. you know, and we can, it's a word of wisdom. We can explore what Synarchy really means. It's when those two are working in harmony. And when they're really working in harmony, it's interesting. You don't need hierarchy very often. You need more synergy, you know, because synergy feels good. It's about relationships. It's about connections. You need a little bit of hierarchy every now and again, you know, so that every now and again, the hierarchy comes up like a wave and then it falls back down again like a wave. And then, you know, so there's this, the way it can work in balance together, that's Synarchy. And the whole, Synarchy is actually how nature operates, you know, because it creates order, you know, it creates higher and higher and higher levels of order and consciousness. And it keeps on opening up to higher realms and higher, and keeps on transcending itself and including what came before, you know, so it includes everything, but it transcends everything. And so it transcends the group as well. Like you were saying, you know, Sarah, you know, sometimes there's an energy that just comes through the group and it's almost using the group. Mm-hmm. And every business knows this, actually. Every business that kind of achieves something experiences that, like, wow, this just came together. We don't know how it happened. It just happened. And it just all came together in this kind of synergy. And then we had a breakthrough and, you know, we went to a whole new level of growth or whatever it was. And then Synarchy, the whole beauty of Synarchy is you have to then put the end, you have to keep asking the question, how can I be of the greatest service? Because it's very easy to get carried away by the growth curve and the excitement of success. And then you kind of get on the vertical line and you forget, you know, and the business goes off on an ego trip, or one person's ego trip, or, you know, wherever it goes. And eventually it grows too big because it starts then, it doesn't recycle its energy. It forgets the question, the grail question, I call it, the grail question. How can we be of the greatest service? That question gets left behind. And then the tower crumbles, and we all know the story. You know, the empire eventually falls apart. But we have a valuable learning. So Synarchy is this constant reorganizing, but it requires that we're we're really recycling the energy of, you know, so in business, for example, a lot of it is about asking deep philanthropic ethical questions, you know, are we doing, you know, and being really honest, you know, with oneself, like about about our limitations and our carbon footprint, and, you know, really honest conversations to kind of weigh the balance, you know, of the energetic balance of the business. So it's not always easy, and also it's a very new thing, you know, for like many of us are just exploring these principles in business for the first time ever. You know, it's never happened before. We're taking cosmic principles and applying them into business. And there's very few have gone before us. Yeah. So we're kind of exploring and experimenting, and it's pretty radical.
I feels that. Lucky my numerology life path is #1 pioneer. Otherwise, I don't know how I'd cope. You know, it's really cool. Two things that come to mind. One is a conversation that Theo and I have been having recently that she brought to me, which I'm so proud and inspired of you, sister, to have you by my side on this journey, but was around being really honest in our marketing. And, you know, marketing is, we're telling our story. So we want to be excited about it and we want to share it with the world, but really checking in with ourselves of like, are we saying the thing we're trying to say from the most honest, integral place? And I mean, it's not that we have ever gone as far as like lying in our marketing, but like just being real with ourselves. An example was saying redefining work for humanity. I mean, that is what we want to do, but we just changed it to playing our part in redefining work for humanity. And that just felt more honest. Like we're also collaborative. We're trying to collaborate with a lot of people and a lot of companies who are also doing the same thing. So just these like fine points of like, how can we be as honest as possible. And I think that's really interesting where marketing and business is shifting altogether to that authentic place. But I'm so grateful for you on that, Theo. And I'm also grateful, Richard, for you expanding my thinking on hierarchy, because sometimes I can be very anti, but it was cool to like see it in that way of like, there's a place for it and there's a healthy way to do it. Like looking at the roles that we hold in the business, I'm the CEO. So sometimes it makes sense for me to come and make a decision about something, but it's not hierarchical in the kind of unhealthy way where it's like, I don't care what anybody thinks. This is just what we're doing because I'm the boss. Like I'm not the boss, but I hold responsibility in this area of the business. And so I will make this decision in this moment. Just feels like a really positive reframe for me. So thank you.
Yeah. It's the grail and the sword, you know, most of the time you need the grail and love. And every now and again you need the sword. You just need a decision that's just clear. That's just come, you know, because the synergy doesn't always know which way to go because it's got so many options. And sometimes you just need someone to step in and go, we're going this way, you know, and everyone goes, great, let's go that way. So, I think you're right. Like so many business practices need to be, you know, questioned, you know, the standard way, like just little things like, you know, how, you know, you go out and you buy something and it's $1.99. Like, why is that?
Yeah.
Do they think we're stupid? You know? Why don't you just say it's $2? You know, it's $2. You know,
I can't even handle that stuff and the analyzing of customer behavior. I'm like, sometimes it's just it's too much. It's treating people as though they're not humans.
Yeah, but psychologists have determined that it works. You know, statistically it works, but that's not the point. The point is it's not correct. It's not right. It's not authentic. It's not honest. You know.
Yes.
So they're little things. There's so many of those things in business. They're littered everywhere. Old practices, old paradigms, old ways of doing things. So yeah, it's an exciting time. I never thought I'd be doing this.
It's so exciting. I mean, we checked ourselves on pricing of this summit, actually. At first, we were talking about pricing strategies and we had these ideas about how we could create different pricing structures and if people registered for Growmotely platform, they would get a discount to the summit. And then we just were like, what are we doing? No, pay what you want, pay what you can, pay what you see value in. And we just scrapped the whole, but it's hard. I mean, I'm still an entrepreneur who's been to business school and has 10 years of this conditioning into me to keep letting it go and trusting and having faith that this is a much more expansive way of actually doing things.
Yeah, well, you're very bold, and I think that's fantastic. It is one of, you know, these are the great challenges, pricing and things like that, like and maintaining authenticity. And each person and each business has to kind of make their own decision on like what really feels correct. And what feels in integrity with our heart and our vision and our purpose, you know, and our mission. And of course it will change. So sometimes you have to, you know, in a way, I feel that we're in a hybrid model. Like I feel that the business I'm part of is a hybrid. It's half in the old and half in the new. And I can kind of feel the new one, but it's a I don't think we're ready for it yet. So it kind of, we have to, you have to earn it. You have to kind of get there. But yeah, so it's an exciting time in that way.
It is. I feel like my whole of 2021 was trying to wrestle with myself about like really going with the heart, and it's still a journey, but I'm on it. We're on it. We're all on it. I'm grateful.
Yeah. And sometimes you can go too far, you know, you go too far too fast, you know, like I've made some mistakes, you know, where I just thought, oh, well, you know, I was thinking idealistically and then it just didn't work, you know. It's like
I get so in my feminine flow that nothing actually happens for a while. I'm like, oh, okay, yep. That's why I need that healthy masculine to, let's write a to-do list today and let's get some shit done.
Yeah, I know.
Just want to be mindful of time. We still have a few minutes, and I just want to leave some space for one or two questions from our audience before we move into the next panel. So I just want to invite Andrea in for her to just share some of the questions we have from our audience.
Again.
Hi.
So Maxine, who is actually going to join us in a few minutes, like 5 minutes, asks you, Richard, what are some of your key habits personally that feed your mind, body, and soul?
What are my habits? My favorite thing that is part of my life that is precious is I'm an early riser, and so I get up before the sun, and I'm a contemplative, so I have a practice where I just contemplate. So I have a chair that I sit outside, whatever the weather's doing. I have a little cover, and in the dark, and I love to see the light coming. I love to witness the light coming slowly, and it's incredibly healing for the body and for the eyes and the mind to be sitting in that light as the sun comes or as it sets. But when it comes in the morning, it's really powerful, and so I sit with that, and I just allow. I just allow whatever to move through me. I have a pen and a book with me, and sometimes I write something, sometimes I don't. Sometimes just great wisdoms come to me, and I think, oh, I should have written that down, and it's just gone. And I love it. I sit there, I just go, oh, well, that it's not lost. It's in the field. And there was a whole book just went past me, or and I just sit there in that pre-dawn energy, and I have some prayers I do as well, little prayers that about the world, that are kind of I connect with everyone in the world in that way, and align myself with the kind of the spiritual heart of humanity. And I find that those very early morning practices are incredibly powerful, and even though it's hard to begin them, once you've done them for a couple of weeks, you can't stop because they just set the trajectory of your whole life. Because how you begin something is how you tend to continue it. So whatever you do when you wake up, it's the most important thing in your day. How you wake up, what you do when you wake up, even if it's just literally a few minutes of something sacred, some words that are special to you, or just writing in your journal, or a prayer, or some quiet meditation, or even a cup of tea. I am a lover of fine teas, I have these little tiny Chinese teas, and I have these incredible essences, and I'll sit and I will just drink some incredibly refined tea, and it's a plant medicine tea, so you take it in, and then it just takes you on a little journey, and whatever is your thing, that just is my thing. So that, and it's good for the body, it's good for the system. So little things like that, simple things. But yeah.
Let me search for another question. Can you share, please, a little bit about 54 gene keys of greed, aspiration, and ascension in terms of conscious business? In other words, what can I do with it? Thank you very much, and have a beautiful day.
Thank you. Well, every one of the gene keys is a journey and can be applied to anything, and they can all be applied to business in different ways, and they all kind of tell the same story, but in different ways. And so greed is, greed is just this energy of life wanting more. It's that energy of it's the vacuum. It's the vacuum, and the vacuum is everywhere in the cosmos, and the vacuum just wants to be filled. So the vacuum just is hunger. It's like, it's desire. It's the nature of humanity. Like, there's something I need and I want it now, and I don't know what it is. And that's the beginning of the journey. And so in that sense, it's just the impulse of desire for more of something, or for purpose, or for you know, for love, or it can be for sex, or it can be for food, or it can be for any of those things. But it's just, I want more. I'm not satisfied. You know, and so that energy is what we call the shadow energy. And if you remain in that energy, going around in a loop, you remain unfulfilled. I mean, you have moments where you have fulfillment because you fill up, and then you come empty again, and then it's just a constant cycle. You know, the Buddha and these great teachers have taught these things very clearly, much more better than I can. But the next layer up is a shift, and that's called aspiration. And aspiration is greed taken to a higher level. It's the same energy, but it's like aspire. It's a wonderful word, aspire. It is connected with the breath. You know, you start to breathe. You're no longer controlled by the greed and by the desire. You start to go, well, what can I do with this energy? How can I be of service with this energy? How can I bring fulfillment, not just about me, filling my stomach, you know, but how can I help others and do more? That's aspiration. So if you bring that into business, it's what I've been talking about earlier, like asking the question, how can I be of greater service? And then that question takes you all the way. And the highest level is ascension. You know, it will take you the whole way up. It's a spiral ladder. And the 54th gene key tells that story very well. It's a spiral, that life is a spiral. So we go around in circles and we learn from each turn. But then we go up another level, and our aspiration takes us higher and higher until eventually we reach, you know, the ascension state, which, you know, is a state of pure wisdom and love and deep understanding. But it doesn't stop there. It's eternal, you know. So in a way, you can apply that spiritual principle. You know, you can take that Kundalini energy of the spiral, you know, that's in your body, it's in all our bodies, and put it into your business and see where the serpent leads you, you know, because it's a serpent power, and the sacred serpent. So you follow it through your life and in your business, and it will take you on these beautiful curves and arcs, and there'll be mistakes for sure, but there'll be breakthroughs, and eventually there'll be transcendence. You know, it's what we've been talking about. So maybe it's a good way to conclude.
That was so beautiful. We have Maxine in the backstage, and I think I will add her to the panel. Thank you.
We have one more panelist as well, or are we still waiting?
Yeah, it's Laura, but she has some technical issues.
Okay.
And I'm trying to.
Cool. Well, while you do that, I'm just going to shed a little bit of light on my own journey. So the 55th gene key, which I can't stop talking about, everybody's been hearing me, but when I read it, I can't see the world the same way anymore. It really expanded my understanding of the systems that have been built and also what is transpiring right now and what we are being invited to transcend. But then I realized the 55th gene key is in my vocation sphere. And then when I was reading the prosperity book, sorry, I forgot the names of how the books are called, but I was reading that and it said this is one of the most important. You offered that the vocation sphere was probably the most important one for people to really contemplate. And it was fascinating, but it all makes a lot of sense of why I'm building Growmotely and what's happening in the world. So if anyone's interested in that 55th gene key, I really urge you to go and read it and we can talk about it.
Actually, I'm if anyone is on the Clubhouse app, which I'm on quite often, this Friday at 6:00 UTC, I am talking about the 55th gene key. So please join.
Oh, I'm going to be there.
And we're going to do it for the next few weeks as well. So we're going to do it on that Friday. It's called the City Club. And you can, you know, in the Gene Keys Club, perhaps you can find a link to it. But, you know, if you come into Clubhouse, you'll find it in there.
Well, so amazing. Well, Maxine, welcome, sister. It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
Love to have you introduce yourself and the incredible business that is a force for good that you're building.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thank you, Richard, for leading me. I'm just vibrating already on the level, and I feel lucky that we got 2 days before to have this conversation. My platform is called Pick My Brain, and I'd say my mission is to unlock 1 million conversations between the world's people. Simply that. And I think in doing so, that will actually unlock a whole lot of other things. I think the value of a conversation I keep seeing, and the value of connections between people is so compounding. But we don't know how to value it. We don't, it's not a product. It's not something we can consume or track yet. And yet this conference goes to show, just bringing people around the table to have a conversation. I found my whole day, I was at a higher level. I was conscious. I was on my walk reflecting about what panelists were saying, the conversations I'm having on the side, and now on LinkedIn, and now on Pick My Brain. It's an extension. So this platform that I'm building really gives people an opportunity to put their hand up and say, I am open and available and accessible to you in these ways. And I invite you to have a conversation with me wherever you are in the world. And these are the things I really like to talk about, and create maybe an economy based on simply conversations, because there's so much energy that's unlocked. So that's what I'm all about. And it just feeds so much into what you were saying, Richard. I was just typing viciously about all the quotes that you were saying. And Sarah, your comment even about talking about 55, the gene 55, I'm like, great. Like, I would love, where in the world can I go have that conversation with someone that can dive in that deeply with me? Can I locate them? And can I unlock some more thinking? Really passionate about that and being here.
Well, we're excited to have you, and I think what you're building is really incredible and important. I think putting some kind of value exchange around these kinds of conversations and interactions is really important. And obviously, Pick My Brain is a platform that creates a monetary value exchange, and there are other ways to exchange value, of course, which is totally fine as well. But it's important, because there is a lot of people in the world who, once they start doing something, they get a lot of requests, and it's really hard to kind of manage and monitor all that and do it in a way where their time and who they are and everything they've learned is truly being valued. But likewise, I love what you're building and making it accessible for people. I think we shared a little bit the other day when we were talking about diversity and inclusion, maybe, and we were talking about hiring different people, but one of the things we talked about is hiring people that don't have the skills and education for the role, but maybe have the passion, the enthusiasm, the cultural fit. And Andrea, who produced this entire summit, fit into that bucket, and we got her some mentorship with someone who was an events manager actually for the League of Extraordinary Women. And I mean, this is her first event, and holy moly, she's just done the most incredible job. So the value of mentorship and a conversation and just having access, and for everyone who's listening, Pick My Brain will be a benefits partner of Growmotely. So when you are hired into a company, or when you're a business leader and your team is on the Growmotely platform, those team members will be able to book a session with someone on Pick My Brain who may be able to act as a mentor or do some knowledge sharing about the area. If they're in marketing or operations, they could find that amazing person that kind of can share knowledge with them, and I think, or share wisdom, to use even a better experience there. But it's really cool what you're building. So thank you so much for being here and the work that you're doing in the world.
Thank you. So you're so welcome. I just can't get that. I mean, when you said share wisdom, Richard, our tagline right now is share knowledge, get paid. And I want to evolve beyond that. I think it will go further than that, because it's that fine line of us transferring to Web 3.0, Work 3.0, Economy 3.0. It's not so transactional, and it's not just, it's not quite monetary. You can't quite measure it. It's not dynamic yet, but it's almost like share wisdom, unlock value. It's actually, I want people to sign up and know that by contributing their wisdom to the collective at a boundaried rate. I think everyone should show up and offer a certain number of sessions to the world as their contributions back, of being of service. But it is about being compensated for that energy. But I don't want to, I still want to move beyond. This conference has inspired me more beyond the dollar, right? That's just one form of compensation. The compensation that has come back for me, having had my Pick My Brain profile now for 4 years and inviting 400 plus people from 88 different countries that have found me and had conversations with me, extend far, far beyond the monetary value I've gained from that. It is, they've turned into active collaborations. I've fallen in love. I've hired employees. I changed my perspective forever. That keeps compounding. And so I'm really excited as we evolve and we grow up to find out how we can go beyond just the monetary component, right? That's one way we reward for contributing, but there's just so many other ways that I can't quite monetize or show. They're intangible, but they're here. They're in my heart. They're in my vibration. They're in my ability to say something differently for the rest of my life. There are all these co-benefits that I can't quite monetize in the same way, but they're definitely unlocking, and which is why I've come with landing on my KPIs, my indicators of success for my business, which business for good. I think we could all reanalyze that. I keep coming back. All I need to do is get the world talking, and the rest will happen. And I don't necessarily need to monitor it or hit, I want to compensate, I want to reward, but the conversation is really what I want to track now. And it's becoming clearer and clearer. But yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
I had this little expression that I've been using with my teachings on the pearl of prosperity. And I'm using it deliberately to just provoke people a little bit. And it's prosperity without success. What is that?
Ooh,
How can
wow.
you have prosperity without success? And it's just a brain kind of, knocks your brain a little bit out so that you think of it, you think of prosperity in a different way, where you remove that notion of the traditional notion of success. And like you're just saying, there's so many different kind of ways of prospering that we don't measure. And you just mentioned many of them, and they're kind of they make us feel good.
Yeah.
Isn't that really what true prosperity is? Isn't that what we really are looking for? If we really know that changes everything.
I think I just made
I love what you're doing.
Thank you. I love that. Maybe it should be share wisdom, feel good. And I'm actually revisiting even how people leave people reviews. I want them to say how this person made you feel. And then maybe I can reverse that algorithm and be like, how do you want to feel right now? This is who you should connect with, because they are able to take you there. And so can we get a little bit more 3D about our decisions to partner and meet people from around the world or strangers based on feeling? Can we go there? I know when I go to plant medicine stores, they focus on that. How do you want to feel? What headspace do you want to be in? What are you looking for? And I'm like, that's a really interesting way to shop. We haven't really shopped that way yet. It's like, what do you need? What quantity? It's very masculine and very linear. And can we, like you said, isn't the goal to feel is prosperity, feeling high and aligned, and in unison and connected? And can I go feel confident by talking to Sarah? Yes. Can I go get a dose of confidence right now? Where do I do that? Yeah.
I think it's super interesting to challenge in a business and personal context, our relationship with certain words and words like success and wealth and abundance and prosperity. And I explore that a lot. Personal success for me, I'm an early riser, but I really don't like waking up to an alarm. So success in my life, when I've created success for myself, is that I don't have to be awoken by this alarm going off at me every day, that I wake up to my natural cycle that is allowed then to evolve with the seasons. And that is success for me. And I think it's really interesting and important to explore that, because words take on meanings that are not their real meaning sometimes, or we have an opportunity to redefine the word for ourselves or in our minds. But I've been really exploring this prosperity and wealth versus wealth perspective, Richard, and the stagnant energy that comes with hoarding money and wealth. It's sitting there versus this flowing energy of abundance and prosperity. And how do we ensure that the resources we have are continuing to evolve and expand the world around us? It kind of makes me think, Theo, of like the infinite, playing the infinite game, or playing game B, which is what we're very committed to at Growmotely, playing the game so that the game continues versus playing the game to win.
Well, I was thinking of this conference, Sarah, like as an entrepreneur, I'm like looking up to you for creating the space. I'm bringing 669 people from around the world together. What is the value of that? Because I know revenue wise as an entrepreneur, it doesn't pay out financially, but the amount of connections and collaborations and ideas that were unlocked at this session, surely there was enough value that was created, but how we traditionally account for it does not represent that. And so I feel like in the big scheme of things on the world's playing field, those things don't get invested in as much when they're actually not being counted correctly, because we don't have the technology to measure the value that was created at a summit like this. You know, it's not there. And so I feel like where we point our resources is misaligned to value creation. It is very aligned with monetary compensation. We're very good at that. We figured that one out, you know, but the spectrum, like, right, the spectrum is so much broader than that. And I think we should challenge ourselves as investors as well, and people that have the financial means to support these, to look at the value creation as opposed to the financial return on investment.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing it generates, that you're generating here, is synchronicity, you know. And synchronicity is actually something you can generate, you know. Like you can generate goodwill, and they're connected, synchronicity and goodwill. And you've no idea, it cannot be quantified. Maybe later when something happens and you go, oh, you know, or it might be years later even. Yeah, and I saw your thing at that summit, you know, and you know, and then years later there's some connection, and you just cannot quantify those things.
Yes.
Or the people that you impact that you never meet.
Yes.
You know, and you never hear about their story. And that again can't be quantified, but at some deep karmic level, it's all weighed and quantified and balanced, isn't it?
Yes, could not agree more. And you know, I see that with the conversations I have. Like sometimes someone comes back 2 years later, and we enter business when it's time. And that's, you know, goes back to a few of the conversations at the summit, not rushing in a linear fashion. You know, letting these seeds that we're planting with this conference and the summit land and let them germinate. And then, like you said, Richard, it's going to take a life of its own. But our current system can't evaluate the value of that. And so I find, when I think we need more of these types of things happening, they're not necessarily in alignment with what's invested. You know, it does take a lot of money and time and energy to invest in community, but the return on investment might not be there yet in the way that we measure. But if we were able to measure it in the way that you're saying, it'd be so big and so compounding that we would start directing more and more resources there. And I think we're starting that. I think it's coming. But it's not in alignment. And I love this thesis of this conference in alignment. How do we get there? By knowing thyself, through all these different mechanisms. Yeah.
One of the downfalls, I think, of a linear-based system as well is that we also anchor to it, which means we also don't leave room for what could be more. Like sometimes we think we're making a sacrifice by focusing on more of these less, you know, not the financial goals, but maybe focusing on happiness and engagement and synchronicity and things. But sometimes it can be more. Like sometimes there's more that the universe is trying to bring to life. But if we're so focused on this trajectory and this goal and this linear factor, I think we rob ourselves of it, or rob the world of it potentially. I don't know, Richard, if you have thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's very topical at the moment, because getting the balance in a business of a plan, having a plan and a structure, and then kind of being really loose with that plan, so that the plan doesn't kind of it doesn't block poetry. It doesn't block the kind of that synergy we were talking about earlier, that free flowing, creative, intuitive, wisdom that's inside each of us. Because in a business, every person needs to be able to follow their intuition individually. It's completely unique to them. So that takes a huge amount of trust and a very kind of flexible way of holding a group. And everyone has to be really responsible for that as well. And that means that there's this self-organizing intelligence that's moving through the group, that's moving through the whole. But that requires, in a way, that everyone's quite mature, and quite emotionally mature, and that emotional maturity has to be kind of built. So early on in the business, or in any organism, you've got to do the work of getting to know each other, and you can't bypass that. You can't kind of let it slip either. And sometimes it feels like a luxury, another meeting just to talk, just to share. But you can't quantify those things. It's like what you're doing, Maxine, like creating relationships and relational fields around the planet or in a business. It is just gold. It's absolute gold. Creating that intimacy, and there's people going, but we need to be earning. We need to be, there's production. There's all these things. We got to meet the goals, but then you can't sacrifice the relational field, because otherwise the culture, starts to kind of flail. It starts to sap. It loses its vitality, and then the whole starts to kind of quiver, and it loses its coherence. That's the word, I think, coherence. So you can't, that's what I was saying earlier about the women in the business creating empathy in the culture, but you have to maintain that as well. So it's a real commitment,
It is a real commitment,
but it actually is enjoyable.
So enjoyable.
But it sometimes feels like
like working out, like when you have a physical.
I have a list this long of things to do.
I know, but I think the more we we reward in business that time to build those relationships. Like, I haven't heard an investor be like, take 2 years to really work on your team. I haven't heard that. I have to I feel always in conflict with, the current system and staying in alignment with that hierarchy and those rules. And then the new system where I'm like, I agree, there is so much time and energy that needs to be put in at the groundwork, and this will pay in compounds later. Right. And I think it is a practice too. I dream of a world where, we've gotten to the point where we know that physical activity is really rewarding for us in multiple ways. And to have 30 minutes of physical activity every day is a good thing. I think we're all pretty educated on that physical component because we're really good at physical things. Now we need to go to that emotional and spiritual level. But I believe in a world where it's also as culturally common to connect with someone intellectually or spiritually through conversation for 30 minutes a day, because it shocks, it increases your perspective, it increases your understanding of the world, it grounds you. And so the way I'm doing that, or I'm trying to do that in alignment with this old world is, okay, I know people, if they buy a subscription, they will regularly consume something. And so what if I could build a subscription that allows you to meet one new person around the world at least once a month? Meet someone that's 84 from Latvia, or 17 from Morocco, or a scientist from, Uruguay. You have that opportunity. And once a month, we're going to give you 1 credit a month for a subscription fee to hold you accountable. And you're going to go discover someone, and you're going to get in the habit of discovering the world's people and meeting the world's people. And I want the subscription, you know, I dream of the subscription being as big as Netflix. It's just about meeting the world's people. And your goal over the rest of your life is to meet one new person in the world once a month. And that, starting there, will get us in that habit of realizing how important it is and how unlocking it can be and how connected we become and how much empathy can transfer with that commitment. Very small, reasonable commitment to start.
I would buy shares in your business now.
Well, thank
I
you.
really think you're onto something massive. I think it's just so rich and so kind of like, you know, right brain. I love it.
Thank you so much. I will take you up on that.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. I had a thing because my teaching is about contemplation, and contemplation, the basis of contemplation is pausing. So you have to pause. And I had this joke in my business. I say, you know, I'm gonna pay you to pause. Right? You know, which is the opposite of everywhere else. Like, you're not allowed to stop. You got to keep going.
Yes.
You're paid to keep going. Like,
yes.
My son drives for Amazon at the moment. He's just, you know, he's 20 and he's got a van and he loves it. But they don't let him. They don't give you any time for lunch. Like, I would say, like, where do you eat your lunch? He said, well, you know, you're supposed to have half an hour, but you know, it's like, it's hilarious. And anyway, so like the beauty of like paying someone to pause every now and again spontaneously, just to do nothing, just to kind of be with their wisdom, with their love, with their feeling in that moment, with their aloneness. That is what increases productivity, you know, in a way but it's counterintuitive, as is your idea, you know, as are all these ideas, and yours too, Sarah. You know, these are counterintuitive, you know, things that we're talking about, but that's what makes them so rich.
Yeah. I think it's just a pendulum. It's like the economy is like this, but it just needs to be like this.
Yeah.
And it's just a swing, and paying to pause. I just want to give room for that, because that is so counterintuitive. But actually, again, if we measured correctly, would be much less expensive and likely lead to longer term benefits down the line. And permaculture, I took my permaculture certificate, which the biggest thing permaculture taught me was to observe the land for 2 to 3 years before touching it, because the land works itself. And yet we don't think that. We go and we don't even observe it, first of all, which is ignorant. You know, we go in and we just bulldoze or flatten because that's the most efficient. And we don't see how it works. But through the art of observation, but nobody's paid for observation, right? You're not paid to pause, you're paid to work. But it's creating so many mistakes and environmental costs, and it's not thoughtful. So, you know, and if the whole world stopped and meditated, GDP would shrink. You know, the very measure that we would harm, the economy would suffer if we paused. So we are out of alignment, right? We've got to know that. And we're seeing it. We're crossing 4 of the 9 planetary boundaries. We're like 40+% of us are overweight. Spiritually, we're kind of lost. We got it. How do we bring that in alignment? How can we pay for pause? You know, how does that work? How do we, you know, are people comfortable enough to pause?
Yeah, no, it's so fun. And it's funny. I was just, you know, discussing with my wife earlier today about, you know, we're reading this article in New Scientist about migraines, and really interesting. And I just came across this thing where there was this kind of there's this statistic that migraines cost the US economy $18 billion a year, right? I'm like, isn't it just fantastic that someone's figured out that how much a migraines cost the economy?
We would.
That's what I mean. Like, how much would if everyone paused, how much would that cost the economy?
Yeah,
well, we might have less migraines for a start, so we could save 18 billion.
We'd have a lot less.
I think this is a really good point, because to dive into in this topic of business as a force for good, like what we're measuring and striving toward, those key performance indicators or metrics, are the very thing that we need to choose counterintuitive metrics to start measuring. I discovered along my journey that the most important thing for me to measure every single month was how happy are my team, because I figured out if my team are happy, everything's going to flow out from there. Like they're going to treat people well, so our customers will be happy, and they'll probably be performing pretty well because they're happy and they're engaged in their work. And if that metric starts dropping, it's like, well, I want to dive in and find out what's happening with our culture, because there'll be a flow-on effect that will then negatively impact the business, and then we get into a downward spiral. But you mentioned GDP, Maxine, and I think that's the most terrible measure of success that we have going right now, and it's driving so many problems. But yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts, both of you, on different metrics for success for when we are truly creating this business of the future, which is a business that is positively impacting. And I used to think about positive net impact, but now I really think about positive impact, just as I've evolved my thinking from sustainability to regeneration through my own kind of studies into permaculture, all that stuff as well. But I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Perhaps Richard first and then Maxine.
You go first, Maxine, because I'm having a pause.
Yes. Contemplate, Richard.
On that too. I'm still thinking about prosperity and success from way back.
Yeah, I know. Lots of things.
Business as a force of good, counterintuitive, but maybe intuitive. GDP is the wrong measure. What I want to check in with the world again. Okay, we just had the biggest change internationally, we've all experienced. And I actually, I find a lot of positives with it. We all went through something together. Wow, that's amazing. That's powerful in and of itself. We stopped and changed a lot of things we did. We had more time for introspection, less time commuting. Dell says that 80% of the jobs that are going to exist by 2030 haven't even been invented yet. I want to check in with the world and be like, what does matter? What should we measure? Employees, what do you want as benefits? Do you want, prescriptions are like top of the line? I'm like, can we reevaluate that? Maybe I would like $1,000 to spend on conversations. Maybe I want to take Gene Keys, the program. What do we all want now? What is the most important? Is it freedom? Is it flexibility? I think that has changed. What are our values again? Conferences like this help us be like, what is the new temperature, the new check in, the new game? What's the new game? The rules just changed. Let's all keep talking about what it is we do want to operate at this new level. Pick my brain. I started again focusing on just measuring, going for one goal. I want to create 1 million one-on-one conversations between the world's people. Everything that supports that, I want to push towards, and measuring that is possible. And I see that conversations have this huge compounding benefit and more value than just what happens. But I don't know. I don't see other businesses' KPIs aligned with maybe what society wants or what society needs. I just want to come to the table and have conversations with you guys. How do you measure your business? How do you let investors, please them, please your stakeholders, and please what the world needs? Can we do that? Can I go to an investor and not feel guilty about not returning as fast as they want me to? And instead being like, just trust me. You get these people talking. This is the new way of being. Like you said, Sarah, we're heart-led. Upwork is great, but Growmotely has heart. And that's the future. People are looking for heart-led careers and companies to work for. So I don't know. It's like let's get to the table again. Let's talk again about what we do want. Because it's old. The old model is out, I think, by virtue of just what happened.
And I think the old model is that the shareholders are the most important stakeholders. Like we've made a commitment to Growmotely that every stakeholder matters. So everybody involved in our ecosystem matters, and we won't make decisions that are detrimental to one or not the other. So we have to keep ourselves accountable to that. We do want to get a return for our shareholders, and that's great. But we want to do it in a way that is a result of everyone and everything prospering within the ecosystem.
Yeah.
One of the things that I don't know, my I noticed someone in the chat. I just found the chat. It's quite fun to see it. Mentioned that it isn't counterintuitive, and you're absolutely right. It isn't counterintuitive. It's counterlogical, but it isn't counterintuitive. It's actually completely intuitive. And so one of the deep intuitions that I've kind of had when in tracking these gene keys and this wisdom that I've been engaged in is the foundation of prosperity, as I understand it, is actually simplicity. And that's a word that kind of we've completely moved away from in our world. And I feel that actually is a word that many people would really like, but they don't know it. And so how do it's a really, because we do have an addictive tendency towards growth, and it's wonderful, and yet, like, I kind of know that to truly prosper, even if I've, Maxine, even if I've reached one person, my job's done. And anything additional is a bonus. So I love your enthusiasm, absolutely love it, and I'm with you on the million. I think it's, I wouldn't touch it. It's so delightful. I just want to hold that other place of what happens if, I take that actually. What happens if in doing this, my work with the gene keys, I wrote the book for myself, and what happens if no one ever read it? And I had that feeling after I'd written it. I thought, wow, that's a powerful book, and I'm really glad I've written it. And I don't know what its destiny is or what my destiny is. And there was a part of me that was fine with that, and always has been, and is surrendered to wherever it wants to go. And I remember I'm writing my kind of final book, which is going to take me years because it's little bits of poetry, as sutras. And I wrote one recently, and it was called The Next Big Thing. And I can't remember the exact words because they're poetic, but it was me sitting in my garden, just watching the next big thing go by, and just going, there it goes. I'm not going to get on that. I'm quite happy here. And because we're always like looking for the next big thing. And I think that is our, and it's part of our nature to do that, and we'll continue. But I think there's also that we need that part of us that just is willing to let it go by, Yes. And I call this the Bodhisattva and the Arhat. I was talking about it recently. And the Bodhisattva is the one that wants to serve the world, that wants to heal the world, that is committed to healing the world. And the Bodhisattva kind of walks to the door of enlightenment, looks through and goes, no, I'm not going in there. I'm going to come back, because then the game's over. I'm going to come back. When the last person here on this planet steps through that door, then I'll go through it. And so they commit themselves to helping everyone else get to the door. But then the Arhat is another being. It's an Indian word. The Arhat walks up, looks at the door, and just goes, yeah, I'm in that, and walks through and sits in there and goes, wow, it's cool in here. and I don't have to do anything anymore. I'm done. I don't even have to help anyone or save anyone. And those two beings live inside us and need to be in balance. And we can have too much of one and too much of the other. Too much Arhat means that we become like, we don't do anything. We're not, and the other one is like, we're so obsessed with helping and trying to heal the world that we forget to relax, and we forget to look after ourselves, and then we often burn ourselves out. So that balance of that simplicity is so important as a part of prosperity. And I think it's a golden rule in businesses, isn't it? And it is a greatest challenge. I find it the greatest challenge to simplify business, to simplify one's business, to simplify the business practices, to simplify everything. Because everything just gets so complicated on its own. You have to almost like go, whoa, okay, do some serious Tai Chi. That's why pausing is so key, because if you don't pause, you don't get back to that simplicity for a few moments, and then you can't see clearly what's the next thing to do. So I wanted to bring that in because I hope it's inspiring to people to simplify one's life as much as possible. Yeah,
it is. It's so important. I have that. I'm just looking at my Gene Keys map right here, but I have the life's work is the simplicity. Gene Key 23 anyway. So my shadow is overcomplicating things sometimes, for sure. And then my gift is making them simple again. So that's a fun dance that I do quite often. My team
just want to
tell you
quickly
about.
jump in because I see that Laura has joined us as well. So just want to give her a warm welcome. Can you hear us, Laura?
Yeah, loud and clear. Thanks, Theo.
Oh, welcome. You've landed just in the middle of a really hot topic. So yeah, just want to make this small pause in the spirit of the conversation to welcome Laura. And I'm just gonna go back to my.
Yeah, Laura. I guess your camera's not working. Is that what's happening?
Yes, and that's why I've arrived later in the conversation. We've spent much of the conversation with tech support trying to get it work, and of course half an hour before the conversation, but better late than never, and for sure. So,
well, we're happy to have you here, camera or not. Thank you so much for joining us. Do you want to just give us a little bit of an introduction on you and the work that you do in the world, and then we can kind of bring you into the conversation?
Yeah, for sure. So I am my work is all in the realm of sustainability. So I've worked in sustainability for over 25 years now. So the first 11 years with heavy industry as an environmental engineer. So really looking to reduce the emissions of some of our biggest polluters, particularly in the resources sector. Motherhood coincided with me, or was a catalyst for me starting my own business. And I founded one of the very first online eco stores in Australia, but it was niched in right into babies. That was my life at that time. And it was called Sustain a Baby. And I ran that for 6 years and I ended up selling that. So I ran that whilst I had a newborn and then a toddler and then another newborn from my home in a very small town in outback Australia. But I was really working with parents all over the globe, helping them to reduce the impact of raising children, essentially, and particularly young children, and educating around, cloth nappies and making and even growing some of your own food and, using even the purchases that you make, becoming a much more conscious consumer. I've got a sustainability podcast, which I've in 7 years of now. So really that's once I sold that baby business, just really focused just in on sustainability and helping the everyday person to reduce their impact on the world. And I still run that podcast. But these days I am back also working as a sustainability engineer again. And I have been for the last 4 years, coinciding that with my business, as I still feel with my skills and credentials, I can be at that table with the big decision makers, decarbonising, reducing the emissions and bringing that very important voice to the table, particularly as a mid-career woman now. So many women drop out of that industry after having children. I was like that first wave of women in the resources sector. And I'm in consulting these days. So, consulting to, again, the biggest polluters and governments, and really trying to help them to, decarbonise and reduce their emissions. So, but still that, that leading voice, and I've helped a lot of people create eco-conscious businesses along the way. So a few hats. Coming in on that last conversation on simplicity really hit home for me. I'm at that stage where I am simplifying a lot in my business and in my life, full stop. It goes with that passion. When you have a big passion and you want to create a lot of change, you can create this change, and then you just add the next steps of the more change that you want to make, or the extra people or companies you're trying to help, without necessarily decluttering some of the old. So I'm at that stage. I'm getting really clear back on my mission, and honing right in on that, and moving some of the clutter from the outside in business and in my life as well. So that hits home. But absolutely love the type of work I do. It's important now more than it ever has been, particularly around our carbon emissions. We've really only got this decade up until 2030 to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions to 50% below what they were in 1990 to actually have a real chance at keeping global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius and minimising the catastrophic collapse of our natural systems that has already started. So this is the decade that counts, and I'll just do my best to inspire and educate and bring many people on that journey, and also support those that are also working in the sustainability space, because, you know, it's very important work.
It is very important. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think,
Thanks.
I mean, we're talking so much and we are coming up to the end of the session, unfortunately. So I want to at least throw one more question to you to kind of hear from your incredible voice and experience. You know, we've been talking about the shift and really asking ourselves as businesses and business owners and people in businesses, you know, how are we showing up as in service, and how are we making positive impact instead of any form of negative impact, and so many things that are evolving in the business world. But I'm curious to hear from you, like, is this actually, I think it's changing at a consumer level. I think it's changing at an entrepreneurship level, for sure. Is it changing in these big corporations? Like, do they care?
Oh, they absolutely care. They and there's two ways. Do they care like I care, like people that deeply care about the environment? Not always so, but they care because some of them care, and it may not be the same means to caring that you or I may have, but they care because they realize that if they don't care and if they don't do better than what the regulations are asking them to do, they're simply going to go out of business. So they recognize that their shareholders and all of their stakeholders care. They also recognize that their workforce and their employees care. It's essential to the survival of every business moving forward. So if businesses aren't socially and environmentally responsible, they're not going to get the best talent. They're not going to get finance. They're not going to get insurance. And they're definitely not going to get customers. It may not be this year, but in 5 years' time, definitely. So people are divesting from companies that aren't serious about sustainability. And by sustainability, I'm meaning environmental, social, and governance. So it's not just, you know, the plants and animals and the air of this world and the water. It's the people and the social networks, and, you know, getting rid of modern slavery and everything, the whole gamut of sustainability. So companies that aren't taking that seriously will be out of business. And for that reason alone, every company is standing up and paying attention.
That's so powerful. And I think there's a common question in our minds, I think, that we oscillate between of like, I want to change the world. I'm going to go out there and do something big and change the world. Or like, I'm just one person, I can't change the world. And it's so like we can swing between the two, and it can feel quite hopeless at times. But I think what, Laura, you've just shared with us is such a beautiful reminder that by us showing up and being the change that we wish to see in the world, there is a ripple. And over time, that ripple grows enough that the change starts to happen and evolve from the pressures that are coming. So, you know, Richard, you talked so much about this naturally happening, and it is a natural evolutionary process. And this is nature right now, and we are awakening to the fact that we need to start correcting some of these things. Otherwise, nature will go on in new ways without us and evolve in other beautiful ways. But you know, it's fun being here, so I'd like to kick on a little more if we can figure this out, humanity. But thank you all so much for joining us. I think I'm right, Theo, aren't I, that we're coming up on time now, and I don't want to. Yeah, awesome.
I think we have enough room to invite some questions from the audience. If Andrea just wants to come back in our space and share them with us.
Okay, we are right on the hour 30. So if we don't have time for questions, I think it's okay. We've covered like a ton of ground here, but Andrea, you can make the decision on that.
I look for some questions, but I didn't see something that wasn't covered already.
Yeah, I think we had a really robust discussion, and I feel very full and very complete and very grateful to you all for being here. I'm so glad we got to hear from you, Laura, even though it wasn't for very long. So I I'm grateful for your perseverance. You have an important voice to be heard. There is something, this is the last session of our summit, besides some recognition of one of our most conscious companies, which I will be announcing soon. But this is the last session of the summit. I think everyone can agree it's been an absolutely incredible couple of days. Thank you all so much for being here. There's been just a thread of comments just constantly going on, connections happening in Discord everywhere. I know speakers are connecting with attendees. It really is just this thriving community and ecosystem. And I'm so grateful. And I would like to read something to everyone, and I would invite everyone to close their eyes while I read it. And it is our manifesto at Growmotely, and we've never actually put it out there yet in the world. And when I was meditating last night, it came to my mind that, or this morning maybe, it came to my mind that I would really like to share it with everybody, because I have felt it come alive in me these last couple of days and come alive in our team and in our community, which is all of you. So if everyone will just join me in just closing your eyes and just taking a deep breath in as I share these words with you, because these words are for you. We are for the pioneers, the movers and shakers, but not the rule breakers. We're for those who know the rules are all made up anyway. Those who forge their own path and create their own reality. We're for the curious, the dreamers and the doers, those brave enough to manifest what they want, the self-sovereign, not afraid to take care of themselves and not looking for a government or corporation to do it for them. We're for those who show up and make time for those who show up for them too. We're for healthy boundaries, deep inner work, authenticity and transparency. We're for being responsible for ourselves and for knowing the greatest impact we can have on the world is through being. We're not for work. We're for never working another day in our lives, because we love what we do, how we do it, and who we do it with. That's us, Growmotely. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for sharing that moment with me, allowing me to share that with you all. Thank you for being here the last couple of days. Thank you to our last panelists here, Richard, in particular, like a great honor to have you. Maxine and Laura, super grateful for your time as well. And Theo, I'm grateful for you putting Richard on our vision board and the visualization we did, and the email that you received the following day when Richard said yes, she dropped into tears. So you're really making an impact with us, Richard. Everyone's obsessed with your work. But Maxine, Laura, thank you all so much. And thank you, everyone. I'll hand, if Andrea wants to come in and do the final boot out, she can me. You are all free to go, as you always were. As you always will be.
Yes, thank you, Sarah and Growmotely team.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
everyone. So I think we're taking a 5 minutes break, and we are going to be back with the Conscious Culture Awards.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrea.
Thank you so much,
everybody.
Richard, Maxine, Laura.
Thank you.
Thank you.